This is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I'm here in Viña del Mar, and I finally tracked down someone I've been trying to track down for a long time. She's very sneaky and avoids these interviews like crazy. Angela Keaton of antiwar.com, founder of antiwar.com. Incredibly awesome website and very interesting. And we're here down in Chile. We're just checking out Gulf Chile, and we'll talk about all that. But first, the very first question, how did you become an anarchist?
My parents.
Well, that's too short of an answer.
Oh, I was, some of us are just born goddamn lucky, and in my case, my father was what I guess we now call the Rothbard. I'm an anarcho-capitalist, and my mother was heavily into Objectivism and very much into like strict entrepreneurship, anti-communism, and making a bunch of money is what she was about. And my mother's amazing, she's still alive. But I'm grateful for the kind of parents I had because I have an amazing life because of those values.
That's awesome. We've almost interviewed like 100 anarchists, and I think you're the first one actually raised by anarchists. Most are actually turned into anarchists or change over time. So you're one of the first people. So you grew up in an anarchist household?
In good old Long Island. Not a place that people think about anarchism, but yeah, we come from all over.
Yeah, so was it all chaos and bomb throwing?
Absolutely not. They were a bit, especially when we kind of did the independent study, now known as homeschool, later in life. But I went to some good private schools. My father was a little bit annoyed when I came back one day and said, "Oh, you know what's great about the U.S.? We can vote for two parties, unlike in Russia where they have one." And my father did this, like, ah!
So disappointing to hear your kids say that.
Yeah, so he yanked me out and said, "We're gonna rethink this whole plan." So,
oh, the public schools, they started to indoctrinate you.
Private.
Oh, private,
yeah,
but it's still bad.
Way too much money. Well, I mean, don't get me wrong, it was better education in so many ways, and I'm glad I went to those schools. They gave me a real basis, but, even in the private schools, you're going to get people drawn to private teaching, and the better private schools are going to have very strong opinions also, and that's kind of when I wasn't able to really debate that back so effectively, because part of the civic religion is, we have two choices, kind of like on a menu, right? Have you ever seen on a menu, have you ever just had two choices? Actually, look at a normal menu, you have many choices. But what if you don't want to eat here at all? And that's what the whole thing was. I mean, I don't want to eat there at all, so.
Totally understand. Let's talk about antiwar.com.
Mm-hmm.
When did you start that?
Well, first off, I had always, my father was a big admirer of someone named Justin Raimondo, probably the H.L. Mencken of his generation. An anti-authoritarian, and if you're a LGBT person like myself, he's a gay hero in every single way.
Also our first LGBT person, as you refer to yourself.
Really?
Well, we had one gay person on. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, but I mean, wow, that's really, I'm only, no, there's a lot, actually, no, Ron Paul was a Pied Piper of homosexuals long before his most recent revolution in 2007, but no, he'd been a big admirer of Justin Raimondo. My father used to say that he's one of the most patriotic people in America, and I believed him. In 2000, I read an article about antiwar.com. I'd already been following it and so on, but I read an article in, I think, the San Francisco Guardian, and I said, I've got to work for these people. It was amazing, it's just the whole story of antiwar.com. Basically, the founders, Eric Garris, Justin Raimondo, Alexei Gilmore, and Colin Hunter, were all compadres of Murray Rothbard and the second Radical Caucus and Libertarian Party. So there's Radical Caucus 2. And it was just like that. I said, someday I'm going to work for these people. And then I made a trip back to Austin in 2006 when I was touring around with some crazy projects I was working on. And one of my buddies, a really good buddy of mine, Scott Horton, had said, you're not going to believe this, but I have a job at antiwar.com. I said, really? Wow. And they want me to do a radio show. And I was just like, wow. So I started producing the show for Scott, and then 2 years later I went on full time. I think after Eric and Justin saw me beat the living hell out of Wayne Root and Bob Barton, Libertarian Party, they knew I was serious about the anti-war movement. So I've been full time since 2008. It is the most amazing job. Yes, it's 60 hours a week minimum. It's like you're on call all the time. It is a blessing. I wouldn't even be doing what I'm doing without that job. And the most amazing thing one can do with one's life is fight for human rights, the basic dignity of people, but also, too, it's just every day the United States government kills civilians everywhere, and it does horrible things, especially we're here in Chile right now.
Yeah,
and the fact that
I'm around here a little bit.
Exactly, and the fact that I get to to fight against that, and I get to speak freely about that I do not endorse what the United States government does abroad, that I do not endorse the empire, that I'm against empire, that I'm against violence, I'm against occupation, colonialism, and torture. That's a blessing, and I speak freely on that. So thank you for letting me talk about antiwar.com.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. I can't believe anyone's pro-war. Whenever I see anti-war, I go, who's pro-war? It's like, I'm pro-rape. I'm pro-kitten stomping.
Yes.
Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Who are these people? What's wrong with them?
Well, I think we're sort of evolving into the non-aggression principle as a way of thinking, but we evolved out of fiefdoms, and now we're evolving out of the nation state.
I just don't understand. Like, 'cause I'm from Canada originally, as you can tell by my
Yes.
accent, and war is just not a big topic up there. Mostly because they're very docile socialist sort of people, but you go to the U.S. and you just hear about it all the time. There's something about, I guess it's the whole empire thing. It just sort of builds this sort of a identity of...
Well, in the United States, we're taught a basic civil religion, and it begins with things like, pledging allegiance to the flag, believing in a two-party system, believing that, democracy, and no disrespect to my brothers and sisters in the anti-war movement on the hard left, but what is known as democracy is basically mob rule, which allows violence against all sorts of brown and yellow people all over the world. In fact, the United States is a racist organization that basically destroys people of other colors and religions, and Islamophobia and anti-Arab and anti-Persian and anti-Central Asian mentality is really, really sick, but it's an outgrowth of our Jim Crow system, which is known as the drug war.
Yes, the drug war has been such a disaster. What do you think about Barack Obama? So here we have this guy who's half black, half white.
Yeah.
So he's white as much as he's black, but everyone calls him black.
No,
which is
he's
strange.
not. Yeah, no. We didn't elect Chuck D or anything. I mean, people slap themselves back like, oh, I voted for Cynthia McKinney. No, you didn't. You voted for a fascist from Goldman Sachs who came from Harvard and is a constitutional scholar. Like, what did you expect from that? He's a right-winger. He represents corporate interests.
Fascist.
And I call him a Generalissimo Obama.
Yes. Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people do call him socialist, and he has sort of this communist upbringing and all that sort of stuff, but I don't know, he kind of has a bit of both, a bit of fascism, a bit of communism, in my opinion.
But not in a good way. And
No,
I mean,
everything is all bad.
nothing affects him. Like, he supposedly went to church with the Reverend Jeremiah Wright was his preacher, but if you listen to the words of Jeremiah Wright, I mean, as crude and vulgar and maybe a little weirdly anti-Semitic as they might be, Jeremiah Wright had some points. The chickens have come home to roost. U.S. foreign policy is abysmal. It's evil. You can't be a religious person, you can't be a Christian, you can't be an observant Jew, you can't be a Muslim and think that what Barack Obama does is right. It's absolutely wrong. You can't support that.
I'll talk to some of those people in the Deep South in those churches. Have you seen those churches?
Well,
It's
nationalism has corrupted Christianity. Nationalism is a form of racism. Let's not deny that. I mean, that's really what it is. And it's corrupted Christianity, and it's destroyed religion, it's destroyed godliness, it's destroyed goodness.
Are you religious?
No, I'm an old school objectivist, Randy.
Objectivist.
Yeah. So, part of the reason why I'm here is for Gold's Gulch Chili, and that kind of calls out to me as an objectivist. But I'm kind of influenced by more modern objectivists like Arthur Silber and Chris Matthew Sciabara. So
Tell me a bit about Objectivism, because I still have not looked into it deeply enough to totally understand it. So if you were to explain it in a couple minutes,
okay,
generally.
all right. I'm just going to scrape away. I mean, you can read The Fountainhead and read Atlas Shrugged. And you can talk about, the basics of those stories are like people have resentments against those who are productive, intelligent, and nonconformist. And it takes personal courage and strength to do that. But it's not just about personal courage. It's about what's morally right. You have a moral, you're a moral thinking being, and you should be against collectivism, altruism, and mysticism, and the empire falls under all of that. The empire is based on collectivism, altruism, and mysticism. Sorry. We were having a bit of pisco sour today in Valparaiso. How do you pronounce that?
Valparaiso.
Valparaiso.
They just call it Valpo around here.
Valpo, yes.
It's easier. Very interesting. I don't know what to even ask you. You're such an interesting person.
Don't, but if you could let me have a hit,
absolutely.
or yes.
Just help yourself. This light is kind of terrible. It's probably got some
whatever.
sort of government regulation.
Government regulation, perhaps, but excuse me, I don't normally do this on camera, but I need the energy boost. Could you be a gentleman, kind of do the cupping thing
Certainly.
here?
There you go.
Thank you. I mean, if I were in charge of women's studies programs everywhere, Rose Wilder Lane, Isabella Patterson, and Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand wrote as a feminist. I mean, I know, yes, I know all the details. She's a little homophobic, anti-feminist, whatever. The fact is, as a feminist, you can't do anything but admire Ayn Rand. What balls she had! She had brass ovaries to do what she did. And she came to the U.S. and she remade her own life, and she made these most amazing books, these works of art. Granted, they're a bit thick, that speak to the people who want something more than to be just cogs in a machine or to be little blobs. They want to create wealth. And people who create art and create wealth are the people who give others opportunities. That's why, I mean, people talk about, unfortunately, capitalism or crapitalism, as you might say, has a bad name, understandably.
Just like anarchy.
And, well, we'll get to that in a second. But the people who are productive and the people who really have talent are the ones who should be not leading, but the ones who give opportunities to others and allows all of us to have a place.
They should be looked up to somewhat.
Exactly.
They should be appreciated at the very least, right?
Exactly.
Whereas in many places around the world, including South America, they still have a lot of that communist sort of mindset, and they kind of look at people who produce things kind of angrily, which is just an insane, crazy idea.
But look, okay, capitalism gets a bad name because it gets connected to people like Pinochet.
Right.
And he's evil. Okay, just want to be very, very clear on that.
Yeah.
That's an evil human being. That was an evil human being. What I mean by capitalism, I mean truly free markets, markets that are freed from a system. And that's nothing but just a fancy term for exchange. You and I would do, and just voluntary. That's all it is.
Yep.
That's all it is.
That's why, to me, anarchy and capitalism are tied together, because anarchy just means you don't want someone to rule you, you don't want to rule someone else, you don't want to use violence against someone else, you want to use completely voluntary forms of living, and capitalism is just another way of saying that. I just want to me, the two words are almost synonymous.
It is, I mean, voluntarism, free trade, and I want to kind of bring this back to the practical matters. I mean, if you want world peace, do what that crazy cultural assassin Ron Paul does. We're friends with all countries, and allies with none. And free trade is a miracle. When we trade oranges and widgets with each other, we create friendships, and we create value for each other.
Sure.
So that to me is what when I talk about capitalism, that's what I'm talking about.
And here again, here's how the government distorts everything. Yeah. They have a free trade agreement, and it's a book about this thing. It should just have one word in there: no tariffs, no taxes.
As the left would say, the one percenters wrote some crazy book. That's all that is. That's all that is.
Yeah, it's total fascism, corporatism, I guess you could call it.
Crony capitalism. I love the Students for Liberty kids, the Koch brothers kids, because they call it crapitalism. And I got to say, it's pretty ballsy.
What exists in the U.S., yes, is capitalism. Yeah. That is not capitalism.
Not at all.
If a little girl needs a license to open a lemonade stand, that is not capitalism.
No.
So you've been in Chile for a while. Have you been here before?
No, I've never been to Chile before. This is my first trip here, and I'm loving it.
Yeah?
It's an amazing country, amazing, beautiful people, and the opportunity here, I think, for North Americans is wondrous. And, most of us in the U.S., I mean, I don't know, I'm not speaking maybe for a large percent of the population, most of us had relatives who immigrated within the past 3 generations to the U.S., and they did it. It wasn't a big deal. They learned English, so what? You and I can go someplace else and learn Spanish. It's not a big deal. We learn new customs. It enriches all of us. I believe that actually immigration and that kind of cultural mixing is a beautiful thing. It's
I agree.
As
long as it's not actually for example, you look at Europe right now, where a lot of Muslims and Africans are emigrating because they can access all these welfare things, and that makes people kind of hate them. They're like, you're taking advantage of us. So when government gets involved, it's terrible. Whereas if these people came from North Africa and they moved to Switzerland and they started a business which had really good kebabs or whatever they make, people would go, I love these guys. They're giving me something that I enjoy, not. So once government gets involved, it's just terrible.
The welfare state creates... Oh, sí.
¿Todo bien, señor? ¿Algo que necesiten?
Todo bien en este momento. Gracias.
You know, the service here is amazing. We're at a wonderful restaurant, as you can see. This is an amazing place. I hope we keep all this in the film because I think it's just an amazing, amazing thing.
Yeah, we got most of the view here. Actually, all around us is beautiful. It's a really beautiful place, Viña del Mar.
It is. Welfare does create resentments, but it also too it creates some psychological dependencies. I mean, most of us have esteem. We have pride, and we want to create our own wealth. We want to create our own opportunities. And when someone just throws us a few pennies and says, "Hey, stay in your place. I'm going to give you a few pennies. Don't do anything."
Yeah.
That's soul crushing. It's destroying. It's destroying. It destroys most of us. And you know, since Lyndon Baines Johnson, the piece of shit. Sorry.
It's fine.
Did you say that?
No, of
okay.
course. Whatever you like.
You know,
it's free broadcast.
He creates a war on poverty, yet I still see poverty. Oddly enough.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Actually, there's more.
Yeah. And I do think it's part of the giant plantation system. I mean,
Definitely.
I hate racism. I hate racial hierarchies. I hate apartheid. And I hate nationalism and colonialism, all those things, because that's what the empire is. It's those hierarchies and stratifications. It's us versus them. It's gay versus straight. It's female versus male. It's cis versus trans. It's all those things. It's like these dichotomies that aren't real.
Right.
They don't really exist. There's 7.2 billion orientations and people and races and ideas, and that's a beautiful thing. Individuality, radical individuality. And whenever I go back home, my mother always talks about, why don't you call it individualism? Because she's right, it is about individualism. The dignity of individuality is really what this is about. And the left talks about universal human rights, and I want the left to achieve universal human rights. And the only way we're going to do that is through anarchism, through really adherence to the non-aggression principle. When each of us interacts with each other peacefully, voluntary, without fraud, that's when you're going to see the amazing things happen.
Absolutely. And I would say everyone talks about minorities. The smallest minority is the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And people just get brainwashed into, there's these groups. I don't see the world that way. I don't think you do either.
No.
There's just us. There's just human beings.
Right.
And some people are different, and some people are bad, obviously,
Yes.
but some people are good. And you have to just sort through all of that, but we don't need all these systems and hierarchies. And
No.
It's just terrible. It really does. I think if we can get through to what we're talking about, the world would be so unbelievably amazing. Whereas it's so funny, though, if you talk to a lot of people and you say, I'm an anarchist, and they go, hey, if the world ever turned to an anarchy world, it'd be just terrible. It'd be Mad Max. It's just everyone would just kill each other. It's like, no, that would not happen.
No.
Like many times, I'm in a city, like actually here in Viña del Mar, I don't know if you've seen any police here in the actual city itself. Have you ever seen any?
I had a brief interaction with police. It was very bizarre. I'll write about it in my memoirs.
Okay, I've never actually seen a police car here. It's just crazy, this idea. Whoever says that if without cops or without government, people just start killing each other, they probably have some serious issues that they might do that, because I have no desire to kill other people if there's no one making sure I don't.
If that were the case, LA, which I live, I love Los Angeles, every different race, creed, color, person, idea, gender configuration lives in LA. And everyday people get along. The only thing that really speaks there is green, because everyone's trading and creating and building and doing things with each other that create value. And those other superficial characteristics don't really matter so much because we see the value as the individual that we're bringing to each other's lives. And that to me is the goal. People talk about the U.S. breaking down in anarchy and chaos and violence, but the fact is, even with probably 20% real unemployment in California, people still treat each other with civilization and values because the North Americans are smart. People in the U.S. are smart. We can be ourselves and we can create things without the United States government. In fact, I suspect we will have more wealth and more opportunity once the United States breaks down. Just the way the USSR did. It'll happen one day. Very, very soon, probably. We'll break down to separate countries, and then we won't really be...
Or even just the states originally,
yes.
and you're seeing all sorts of secession movements now. And I always say, if at first you don't secede, try
again.
And they're trying in Colorado now, they've been talking about in Texas. Even if they can get down to 50 states for a little while, people will start to realize, this is way better. And then maybe we'll get down to every city as its own state, and then every neighborhood, and then eventually every single person is their own state.
Yes.
And it'd be beautiful.
Each person recognized for his or her individuality, and that's a beautiful thing. And that, if you can read, you don't need to read through the Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged to understand that. But I think that was what Ayn Rand was getting at, and she did some amazing things to escape from communism. And I don't know, those gifts, and I think we were blessed to live so closely in time to people like her and Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich Hayek and Thomas Szasz and all these amazing minds. We were very, very lucky to be in this part of history.
It is a very interesting time, isn't it?
It is.
It's incredibly interesting. If you think about it 100 or 200 years ago, it really wasn't anything like today. And if you think back 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, it was nothing like today. It's really happened so fast. And I think that's part of the reason that a lot of people are getting a little confused about what's really going on, because it's happening so fast. Like if you talk to a person who's 100 years old, they would have been born in 1913, almost before the automobile, before the airplane, definitely before the internet, before computers, before radio, before television. Like all those changes happened. All that came out of the free market didn't come from the government. And if we can keep the government out of our way for the next 100 years, you can't even fathom how far this human race will go.
I don't know. I think we've got so much in our evolution, and for me, I plan to live out my full 120 years, and maybe with a little help from Alcor or another couple hundred, because I want to see how this story ends. You know, I want to see the world wake up, not like in the Alex Jonesy sense of waking up, but I mean just like we evolve. We're evolving. We evolved out of fiefdoms. We're evolving out of the nation state, and we're evolving to individuality, and I think that's the right thing.
Yeah, it's incredibly interesting. I'm very curious to see what happens. I think there's going to be some dangerous times in the years ahead as these nation states start to collapse, and there will be some periods of turmoil, and you have to definitely be prepared for that. But if we can get through that, and if we can spread this message, it'll be a whole new world, and it'll be beautiful.
It will be.
Well, I guess that's a perfect place to end this interview. So thank you very much, Angela.
Thank you.
And it's been my pleasure, and let's just hang out on the beach for a while and have some drinks. So that's another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.